The large chamber of the Interstellar Council felt unusually tense on the day they gathered to discuss the fate of ancient Terra. Representatives from different worlds sat around a long curved table made of a bright metallic alloy. The walls shimmered with slow lights that moved like soft waves, meant to keep the mind calm during long meetings. But even with the calming lights, everyone in the room felt uneasy. Something about Terra always created mixed feelings. Some saw it as a birthplace that deserved respect. Others believed it was only a symbol of an old era that no longer mattered. The session began with a quiet tone. A council speaker stood up and explained the purpose of the meeting. His voice echoed throughout the chamber, even though he spoke gently. He said that Terra, the world from which humans first began their journey to the stars, was now abandoned, silent, and considered dangerous due to unstable environmental systems. He added that the planet had been untouched for centuries, and no colony or research team had returned there for generations. Most representatives already knew the basics, but hearing it spoken aloud made the moment feel heavier. Terra was more than a planet. It was where everything started. It held the roots of human history. But for a long time, people avoided talking about it, almost as if they were afraid to think about what had been left behind. A representative from a distant colony requested to speak. She stood up slowly and said that Terra had been unstable for too long, and that the council should formally declare it unfit for future use. She argued that the planet produced unpredictable energy signals that interfered with nearby systems and satellites. She insisted that the council should condemn the world officially, closing any chance of returning to it. Another representative quickly added that Terra's old structures were breaking apart. Ancient machines buried under ice sheets and oceans, activated randomly from time to time, releasing unknown waves through the galaxy. In the past, these signals caused confusion in communications, even disabling a few probes sent near the solar region. Many considered Terra a risk to the peace of modern colonies. As different voices spoke, the council chamber grew louder. Some representatives raised concerns about treating the birthplace of humanity with disrespect. They reminded the council that Terra was once the heart of culture, science, and exploration. Condemning it felt like erasing a meaningful part of history, but others disagreed. They believed that Terra's silence over the centuries meant it no longer held value. They saw it as an empty world full of decaying technology and unpredictable reactions. They argued it was better to step forward without being held back by the past. The debate went on for hours. Some talked about memories passed down from ancestors. Others read old documents, records of early explorers, and details of lost technologies. Many admitted they had never seen Terra themselves. They had only heard stories that sounded more like legends than facts. Finally, after the long discussion, the council leaders called for a vote. Everyone sat still, waiting for the result. The atmosphere felt almost too quiet. Even the usual hum of the chamber's machines seemed to fade. When the results appeared on the screen, it became clear that the majority had chosen to condemn Terra. The council would release an official declaration stating that ancient Terra was no longer recognized as a protected world. It would be labeled as obsolete, unstable, and unnecessary for future growth. It would be left alone in silence. Some representatives nodded with acceptance, feeling they had made a practical decision. Others looked down, unable to shake off a sense of loss, as if something important had slipped away. A few remained motionless, staring at the screen as if trying to understand how humanity had reached this point. The council speaker prepared the final message, which would be sent across countless systems, informing every colony of the new decision. A soft hum filled the room as the message was encoded into a signal. The signal would travel across the galaxy, passing through communication stations, Satellites and old channels still connected to the ancient regions of space. No one in the room suspected that the signal would reach more than just official receivers. They believed it would bounce harmlessly across the void, informing people of a simple administrative decision. But deep beneath Terra's surface, there existed technology no one had remembered. Systems that had been created during humanity's earliest attempts to survive. Machines that were engineered to respond when Terra itself was challenged not far away. Beyond the Council's shining worlds, Terra remained as silent as ever. Thick clouds covered most of its sky. Great forests, frozen in some places and wild in others, stretched over old ruins. Oceans crashed against shattered coastlines. The planet seemed asleep, untouched by time, but buried under mountains, oceans, and deserts lay enormous structures built long before any modern colony existed. They had been created during an age when humanity feared extinction. These structures were tied to a network known once in legends as the Dormant Fleet. Most believed it was only a story told by explorers who wanted to sound dramatic. They said the fleet was a myth created to inspire confidence during difficult times. No records in the Council's modern databases confirmed its existence, yet the system was real. The Council's condemnation signal entered the solar region and traveled through old communication rings floating in orbit around Terra. Even though these rings were thought to be fully inactive, one of them caught the signal. Its interior lights flickered briefly as long sleeping circuits awakened. The encoded message spread across the rings and shot down into the planet's atmosphere. Inside Terra's crust, sealed command cores detected the signal. For the first time in centuries, they opened their archives. Soft humming sounds echoed through ancient halls deep under the planet's surface. Lights that had not glowed in hundreds of years lit up one by one. Thousands of small, watchful systems came online, analyzing the message. The condemnation was interpreted not as a political ruling, but as a direct threat to the legacy of the world's creators. The system was designed to protect the memory of ancient Terra at any cost, not through force, but through presence. It was made to awaken only if Terra was declared worthless or abandoned. Still unaware of what had been triggered, the council members left the chamber after the session ended. Many were tired, their faces showing the stress of long debate. They believed they had made a responsible decision. They believed the story of Terra had finally closed, but far below Terra's oceans, metal walls began to shift. Massive gates opened as water rushed out of long-sealed tunnels. Machines the size of buildings shook off centuries of dust and ice. Deep in the mountains, stone cracked as hidden chambers pushed outward. Entire sections of terrain moved as large structures prepared to rise. People on distant colonies continued their daily routines. They had no idea that something ancient was stirring, something built by early humans, something powerful, but created not for destruction, for remembrance. As Terra continued to awaken piece by piece, no one in the council realized that the decision they had made so casually would soon return to them in a way none of them expected. What they had viewed as an abandoned world would soon prove it was far from silent. Far from the glamorous colonies and busy trading routes, a small listening post floated quietly on the edge of the solar region. It was one of those stations people forgot existed because it rarely picked up anything important. Most days, the station received only soft cosmic noise, gentle waves from distant stars, and the faint echo of old satellites that drifted endlessly in cold space. The crew there lived a calm life, their work slow but steady, with long hours where nothing changed. But on the morning after the council condemned ancient Terra, a silence broke. One of the monitors, an old round device that many considered outdated, began flashing a dull orange light. At first, the crew thought it was a system glitch, something caused by the station's aging circuits. But when they listened closely, they noticed the sound behind the alert was different. It wasn't random noise. It had a rhythm, a pattern, like a distant ticking that tried to follow a sequence. A young observer leaned closer, trying to make sense of it. For almost an hour, he watched the screen, confused yet curious. He didn't think it was dangerous. It didn't sound like a non-attack. It sounded more like a forgotten message, trying to break through centuries of dust and silence. He saved the recording and labeled it as a potential anomaly. He wasn't entirely sure what he had found, but something inside him whispered that. It shouldn't be ignored. He opened the logs from the past week and compared them. The new signal didn't match anything the station had ever received. For a moment, he wondered if it was connected to the Council's recent decision. But then, he shrugged the thought away. How could an old world like Terra respond? There were no people left there, no colonies, no active stations. Terra was supposed to be completely asleep. Still, the strange pattern bothered him. It felt intentional. He sent the recording to the main communication hub outside the solar region. The message would take hours to reach them, but he didn't mind. His job was to report what he found, nothing more. He just hoped someone would look at it seriously. When he returned to the control room, another alert popped up. This one was clearer, stronger, more structured. The signal pulsed like a heartbeat. The rhythm repeated every few minutes, almost as if something was trying to say, "I am here." He recorded the second anomaly and added it to the report. Meanwhile, on Terra, the effects of the Council's condemnation were spreading deeper than anyone could predict. Along the planet's dark ocean floors, old machines continued waking up. Panels glowed with faint blue lights. Thick cables vibrated as power surged through them for the first time in centuries. Under vast fields of cracked earth, dormant reactors warmed slowly, releasing soft veins of light into tunnels hollowed out long ago. Ancient satellites orbiting Terra were also coming alive. They spun gently, adjusting their positions with short bursts of energy that surprised even their dusty metal frames. They scanned the space around them and began sending encrypted codes so old that no modern device recognized them at first. These satellites formed a communication net back in the earliest human ages. They were built to watch, record, and wait, and now something inside them decided the waiting was over. On the listening post, the strange pulses grew stronger. The crew no longer believed it was just noise. Someone suggested it might be interference from a passing object, but nothing had entered their scan range. Another crew member wondered aloud if the signal came from an abandoned ship drifting nearby. But the direction of the signal remained fixed. It pointed straight toward Terra. The observer who first detected the anomaly felt a cold thrill. He didn't know why, but the signal made him uneasy. Not in a fearful way, more like when someone whispers your name from far away, even though you know you are alone. He lowered the station's external mics and listened again. The pulses transformed into a steady sequence of tones. They were old, very old, almost like a forgotten language. He didn't know how to describe it, but the message carried purpose. Across the galaxy, similar anomalies were detected by a few smaller outposts. Most officers dismissed them as technical glitches. Some believed the listening posts were picking up old echoes from the condemned archives the Council had sent out. But the officers who paid attention felt something shifting, something awakening. In colonies closest to the solar region, elders who studied early human history noticed the strange patterns in the data. These elders kept old stories alive, stories about Terra's mysterious technologies, about structures built with ideas far ahead of their time. They remembered hearing about the Dormant fleet, a fleet supposedly constructed to guard Terra if humanity ever lost its path. Most laughed when they heard those tales. They believed they were just exaggerated stories from explorers who wanted to impress their listeners. But the older generation never dismissed the legends so easily. They believed that even myths were built on seeds of truth. Now, when they heard about the sudden signals from Terra, many felt something stir inside their hearts. A kind of anticipation mixed with quiet fear. They began calling local councils, sending requests for more information, asking if something unusual had happened at the Interstellar Council meeting. Some officials responded, but their answers were brief and uncertain. They said Terra had been discussed, yes. The planet had been formally condemned, yes. But the rest was complicated. They assured the public that there was no danger and nothing worth worrying about, but reassurance did nothing to calm the questions rising in the outer settlements. A historian in one colony, who had spent most of his life collecting records about early Terran engineering, went to his private archive. He brushed dust off old documents and holograms containing technical diagrams. Several blueprints showed strange machines, shaped in ways that no modern engineer used anymore. Their designs were sharp, layered, and complex. He studied diagrams that mentioned automatic activation systems. The words protection protocol appeared more than once. And in one old file, almost forgotten in the corner of the archive, he found a diagram labeled Core Signal Response. When he expanded the file, his hands trembled slightly. The ancient system was designed to awaken if Terra received a specific kind of message one. That indicated the planet had lost recognition or was in some form of danger. And the Council had just sent such a message across the galaxy. Suddenly, he understood the signals the outposts were detecting. They were not random. They were responses. He contacted regional authorities immediately, urging them to open an investigation. But most of them hesitated. The idea of Terra responding on its own sounded impossible. Machines didn't activate after hundreds of years. Systems didn't restart without people. And forgotten fleets didn't just wake up. Still, the historian remained firm. He explained that Terra's earliest engineers built systems far more advanced than people remembered. Their goal had been survival. They had created machines designed not for war, but for safeguarding the planet's legacy. As more reports arrived, the Council's discomfort grew. Many representatives disliked the idea that something on Terra was moving. They had just condemned the planet. They didn't want to reconsider their decision so soon. They hoped the strange activity would fade on its own. But Terra didn't stop. Signals became clearer. They grew brighter in strength. They began forming sequences that traveled through old channels and spread through the solar region like a heartbeat waking up from a long sleep. And yet, no one still understood what these signals meant or what they were trying to announce. The Council's response would come later. For now, the galaxy watched as something ancient began to stir on a world everyone thought was silent. The observers, the elders, the historians, and even those who didn't believe in myths, everyone felt the same growing tension. Terra was waking up, and whatever it was preparing for, it was only the beginning. The strange signals coming from Terra spread farther than the Council expected. They traveled across old relay stations, slipped through tiny communication gaps, and reached distant colonies where people still remembered stories about the ancient homeworld. These outer settlements were small, quiet places where families lived slow, steady lives and shared memories passed through generations. When the signals reached them, people began asking questions. At first, most settlers didn't understand the technical details, but they understood enough to feel uneasy. Something was happening on Terra, something no one had seen in centuries. Someone in one settlement said it reminded them of the old tales about the sleeping watchers, machines that were said to guard ancient knowledge. Another person said the patterns in the signal felt like the rhythm of a call, like someone trying to speak across time. A Researcher living in one of the colder colonies spent hours looking at the data sent through the public channels. The signals fascinated him. They weren't random, and they weren't coming from natural storms or cosmic debris. They had structure. He tried breaking them down into smaller sequences, hoping to find a meaning, but the patterns were older than anything he had studied. They didn't match any modern code. He tried to contact nearby stations to compare notes. Most replied slowly, unsure if they should share sensitive information. Terra had always been a sensitive topic mostly, because no one wanted to admit. They didn't understand it fully. In another colony closer to the solar region, a group of elders held a small gathering in their community hall. They were among the few who still studied the early periods of human expansion. They had stored old books, cracked tablets, and holograms filled with forgotten knowledge. When they heard about the signals, they weren't surprised. They weren't calm either, but they weren't shocked like younger generations. One elder leaned forward and said in a quiet voice that Terra had always been more than a place. It was a symbol of everything humans had learned, gained, and lost. She reminded everyone that the early humans, before the colonies spread across the stars, built machines far ahead of their time. She said they built systems that could survive without people, systems that could wait longer than any living memory. Another person in the hall said he once heard from his grandfather about the Dormant fleet, a hidden network of vessels buried somewhere on Terra. He admitted he never believed it fully. It sounded too strange, like something from an old legend. But now, with these signals, he wasn't so sure anymore. A sense of worry began spreading across the outer colonies. People whispered about what might be happening. They wondered if Terra was trying to send a warning. Others thought it might be reacting to something the Council had done. No one had confirmed the Council's decision to condemn Terra yet, but rumors moved faster than official statements. Eventually, the truth reached them. News channels broadcast short reports saying that the Council had formally declared Terra obsolete and unstable. The announcement was brief and dry. It didn't mention anything about the signals. It didn't mention the strange activity happening on the old satellites orbiting the planet. It simply said Terra had no further use. Many people felt unsettled. Even those who had never seen Terra felt connected to it in some way. It was the place where humanity first grew, struggled, and built its early dreams. Calling it obsolete made them feel as if part of their identity had been pushed aside. In the deeper settlements, far from the glowing trade routes and well-organized cities, the tension became sharper. These places kept old archives that modern colonies had dismissed. Their records were dusty, but their information was rich. One settlement, hidden in the mountains of a distant world, had an ancient storage room filled with research notes from explorers who once traveled back to Terra many centuries earlier. Inside this storage room, an archivist discovered something strange, a set of old diagrams that matched the patterns found in the recent signals. When she compared the diagrams with the signals broadcasting through the listening posts, she was shocked. The diagrams suggested that Terra used self-repairing energy systems. These systems could respond automatically to threats or major disturbances, even if no humans were left alive to guide them. She sent her findings to regional authorities, but as usual, most officials didn't react. They felt Terra had been silent for too long to matter. But the archivist refused to ignore the truth. She reached out to researchers across other colonies, sharing her findings bit by bit. Slowly, people began connecting the pieces. Meanwhile, back on Terra, the awakening continued. Deep underground, metal walls shifted and creaked. Giant doors that had been sealed for centuries unlocked with soft mechanical sounds. Under old oceans, machines moved like slow shadows, sending vibrations. Across the seabed, on the surface, storm clouds seemed to move differently, shaped by energy rising from below. Those listening posts in space picked up more signals stronger, and clearer than before. They had a steady rhythm now, like a countdown. Every transmission was more intense, more focused. It felt like Terra was not only waking up, but also preparing for something in the outer settlements. People gathered in community halls, trying to understand the meaning of it all. The elders read ancient notes aloud. The researchers studied data. Families whispered about what this meant for the future. Many wondered if Terra was trying to reach out, like an old parent calling to children who had wandered too far. One settlement leader said, something that stuck with many listeners: "Worlds do not wake up for no reason. Something we did, or something we forgot, has been remembered by Terra." Across space, the Council began receiving more reports about unusual activity. But many of the representatives were unsure how to respond. The condemnation of Terra had been completed. They believed the decision was final. Some didn't want to admit they might have been wrong. Others feared what an awakened Terra meant. They feared losing control of the narrative in private conversations. Some council members felt anxious. They wondered if the condemnation signal had triggered the activation. They wondered if Terra's old systems were interpreting the council's decision as a threat. But they kept their concerns hidden, not wanting to appear uncertain. More anomalies appeared in the following days. Energy spikes around Terra were detected by passing patrol ships. Old satellites that had not worked in centuries suddenly flashed. Bright lights. The orbit of several objects began shifting as ancient thrusters activated. People who tracked space movement noticed patterns, perfect arcs, perfect timing, nothing accidental. On one of the outer colonies, a retired engineer watched the news with deep concentration. The signals reminded him of old training sessions from his youth, where instructors spoke of hidden technologies humanity once relied on. He told his neighbors that the signals sounded like a wake-up call, not a threat. He explained that Terra's early engineers believed that if the world ever faced danger or disrespect, the systems would rise to defend its legacy, not through violence, but through undeniable presence. The engineer's neighbors asked him what that meant. He said, "It means Terra wants to remind us it still exists." In time, more people began believing it. The signals no longer felt mysterious. They felt intentional, purposeful. Everyone wondered the same question. What exactly was Terra preparing to show? The galaxy watched the solar region with anticipation. Those who once ignored Terra now paid attention. Those who doubted the old legends began reconsidering. And those who believed in the dormant fleet felt their hearts race. Terra's awakening was no longer a hidden event known only to researchers and quiet outposts. It had become a growing mystery, spreading across every corner of human space. Something ancient was rising, and the world that once gave birth to humanity was no longer silent. The council chamber looked peaceful from the outside, but inside, every representative felt a heavy pressure building slowly. For days, strange reports from Terra had reached them, and none of the representatives knew what to make of it. Some claimed the signals were simply leftover echoes from abandoned satellites. Others whispered that Terra was reacting to the condemnation. But no one dared say it out. Loud at the center of the chamber sat a long oval table surrounded by screens, showing live data streams from research outposts. The screens flickered repeatedly, displaying waves of energy patterns measured near Terra. Every few minutes, the signal spiked, forming shapes that resembled coded messages, although nobody recognized the language. One of the council leaders stood up and cleared his throat. His voice sounded calm, but his eyes showed quiet worry. He reported that patrol ships moving near the solar region had seen sudden flashes of light in Terra's orbit, flashes bright, enough to pick up on sensors from millions of kilometers away. The room grew tense. He continued explaining that old Terran satellites thought to be dead for centuries were waking up one by one. They were moving with perfect coordination, aligning themselves in a formation and no one had ever seen before. Some twisted gently into different angles. Others changed their orbits, and a few began spinning slowly as if preparing for a task. Council members had no answers. They had believed Terra was empty and silent, a fading piece of history. But now they struggled to understand how this was possible. They didn't want to admit it, but they feared their condemnation had triggered something they were not prepared for. One representative raised her hand and asked quietly if this could be a natural chain reaction, perhaps caused by old reactors losing stability. But the scientists present shook their heads. Nothing about these signals looked random. They were too precise, too rhythmic. They carried intention. Another representative slammed his hand lightly on the table, insisting that the council needed to send a team back to Terra. He said humanity should have never abandoned its birthplace for so long. He said they didn't know what mysteries or dangers they had left behind, but several others opposed the idea immediately. They insisted Terra was unsafe. They reminded the council of past accidents when explorers tried returning to the planet centuries ago. Strange storms had appeared during landings. Machines shut down unexpectedly, and some explorers had barely escaped alive. No one ever fully explained those events. The council continued arguing. Their voices filled the chamber like a storm. Every representative wanted answers, but nobody had proof. The room felt divided, not just by ideas, but by fear and pride. While the council argued, Terra itself continued its silent transformation. On the planet's surface, a blanket of thick clouds rolled away from an old mountain range, revealing massive cracks in the ground. These cracks glowed softly, illuminating hidden structures beneath the surface. The structures pulsed with slow, steady energy, an energy that spread across the land like a heartbeat dot in deep underwater trenches. Large metal frames rose from the ocean floor. They shook off centuries of rust and sand, releasing long chains that snapped open like powerful vines waking from sleep. When the massive frames emerged fully, they resembled ships, but not like any modern ship. Their designs were smooth, curved, and ancient, as if shaped by a forgotten era. They didn't rise completely. They remained half submerged, waiting. Across the planet, enormous doors hidden under deserts began opening with a deep rumble. Dust shot into the air as if the world itself was exhaling after a long silence. Inside these massive underground halls, countless machines flickered on. Some projected tiny beams of light that scanned their surroundings. Others stayed motionless, still waiting for their purpose. None of these movements were visible from the colonies yet, but the energy signatures they released were powerful enough to shake the sensors of every listening post in the solar region. On one small outpost floating near Jupiter's orbit, the crew nearly panicked when their monitors lit up. Bright white. They thought the station was malfunctioning. But after a few minutes, they realized the signal came from Terra itself. The young observer, who had first noticed the early anomalies, watched in disbelief. He had never seen a reading like this in all his years on the listening post. The signal was strong, clear, and organized. It was not noise. It was communication. He stared at the screen, his heart beating hard. The pulse rhythm had changed. It no longer sounded like a simple wake-up call. It sounded like preparation. As if something massive was forming a pattern of plan, he sent the new data to the central hub immediately. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote the report. He didn't know what Terra was doing, but he felt certain of one thing. This was not an accident. Back in one of the outer colonies, the archivist who earlier discovered the old diagrams gathered a group of researchers in her study hall. She displayed the latest signals on a glowing panel near the wall. She pointed out the patterns, linking them to ancient writings from Terra's earliest engineers. The writings described a system that would awaken only in response to two specific triggers, external danger, or the belief that Terra had been abandoned. The archivist looked at the group and said, "The Council gave the second trigger themselves. They condemned Terra. They told the universe it was abandoned." The room fell silent. A researcher with gray hair rubbed his chin slowly and said he believed Terra had not awakened out of anger, but out of duty. If Terra's systems were built to protect legacy, then they were doing exactly what they were designed for, activating the Dormant fleet. Someone asked what the Dormant fleet actually was. The archivist explained that early human engineers created a network of vessels, satellites, and underground structures designed to preserve knowledge and defend Terra's memory. She said these machines were meant to act as guardians, not weapons. She added quietly, "But we don't know how advanced they truly were." A younger researcher leaned closer and asked if the fleet could be dangerous. The archivist hesitated. She didn't want to cause fear, but she couldn't hide the truth. "There is no record of the fleet harming anyone," she said slowly. "But its full purpose was never documented. Some believed it had functions we still don't understand." The group exchanged uneasy glances. As the news spread, people across the colonies grew restless. Families watched the broadcasts with anxious faces. Workers in factories paused their routines to check updates. Pilots in training centers whispered nervously to each other. Even the younger generation, who had learned very little about Terra in school, felt something shift in the air. Everyone understood one thing clearly: Terra was not acting like a forgotten world. Meanwhile, the Council finally decided to hold an emergency meeting. They couldn't ignore the rising panic, the official reports, or the reaction spreading across the colonies. Representatives filled the chamber again, their faces more serious this time. One leader suggested they reverse the condemnation immediately. He argued that the decision had triggered Terra's activation. Another leader disagreed, claiming they didn't know enough yet. He insisted the Council should gather more data first. A few representatives even suggested approaching Terra cautiously, with a diplomatic signal, though none of them knew how to speak to a machine that had slept for centuries. The debate went on, but this time the fear was visible. No one wanted to take responsibility for a mistake of this scale. No one wanted to admit they underestimated the world that gave birth to humanity. But while they argued, Terra continued awakening deeper systems. Under ice fields near the south pole, a massive circular platform began turning slowly. The ice above it cracked loudly, sending sharp echoes across the frozen land. Beneath the platform, a powerful reactor hummed, preparing something enormous. In the old deserts, signals from underground chambers grew more intense. They shot upward through the sand and burst into the sky like beams of light in orbit. Satellites aligned perfectly, their formation tightening into a precise geometric shape. And then, at last, something new happened. A massive shadow appeared on Terra's horizon, not an explosion, not a storm, but the slow rising of something enormous from beneath the planet's crust. Something that had waited centuries to awaken. The galaxy, watching from afar, held its breath. Terra was no longer quiet, and soon everyone would know exactly what had awakened. When the sun rose over the quiet plains of ancient Terra, the light touched ships that had not moved in ages. Their metal surfaces, once bright silver, now held a faint golden glow, as if the world itself wanted to welcome them back. The air was calm. The wind was slow. But deep under the soil, where the old machines rested, something powerful had started to breathe again. He stood on a rocky ridge overlooking the valley. He had barely slept through the night, not because he was afraid, but because his mind could not stop thinking about what was happening. Every distant shake of the ground, every low hum rising from the hills, felt like a sign of something massive unfolding. He had lived on Terra all his life, but he had never imagined he would witness an awakening like this. Not in dreams, not in old stories, not even in the secret history scrolls. He wiped dust from his face and looked toward the horizon. The old towers, half buried under soil and vines, were no longer silent. Bright rings of light pulsed along their sides, climbing upward like a signal being sent into the sky. It did not feel dangerous. It felt more like Terra was stretching its arms after a long sleep, remembering who it used to be. Behind him, heavy footsteps climbed the ridge. Lyra approached with a small device in her hand, her expression calm, but her eyes full of thoughts. She always tried to stay composed, but he could see she was struggling to understand the scale of what they were seeing. They're waking in waves. She said quietly, "First the underground generators, then the towers, now the valley hangars. The patterns are too perfect to be random." He nodded without looking away from the glowing structures. "It feels like they were waiting for a moment like this." "It feels like they were waiting for us," she said under her breath. He finally turned to her. "You think Terra is responding to us because we came back?" "I think Terra never forgot," she replied, "and the Council made a mistake thinking this planet was just old soil and empty stone." Her words stayed in the air for a long moment. None of them wanted to say it out loud, but they were both thinking the same thing. Terra had been condemned by the Council, dismissed as a primitive world with no value. But everything happening now suggested Terra's past was far more advanced than anyone realized. A sudden trembling rolled through the ground. Tiny rocks slid down the ridge. He steadied himself. Lyra grabbed his arm to keep her balance. From the valley below, a massive door made of metal and stone began to push upward. Dust burst out from the seams. Light leaked from the edges. "That's a hangar," he whispered. "A really big one." As the door continued to rise, a large shadow formed beneath it. When the door finally locked into place, letting out a deep metallic thud, the shadow shifted. The dust settled. Lyra raised her device, scanning the shape slowly emerging into full view. "It's a ship," she breathed, "but not like the smaller ones we saw before. This one looks like a command vessel." The ship stepped out of the hangar with movements that felt almost alive. Its surface changed color as the sunlight hit it, adjusting itself like it was waking its senses. It was tall, with long armored plates and bright blue lines running along its sides. It looked like something built not just for war, but for leadership. He felt a wave of awe wash over him. Terra was never weak. They said it was a primitive world, but look at this. Look at what's been hidden here. Lyra lowered her scanner. Slowly. This isn't just a fleet. This is a system. A whole network of machines built to protect the planet. And now that the Council has condemned Terra, he said, they're going to see the truth the hard way. But he did not say this with anger. It was more like a quiet realization of what was coming. A soft breeze moved across the ridge. For a moment, the world felt peaceful. But that peace did not last long. A sharp sound echoed across the sky. Lyra looked up first. A line of bright lights streaked through the clouds. Not from Terra, not from the ancient machines. These lights came from the stars. "It's a Council scout fleet," she said. "They're already watching." He clenched his jaw. They want to see if Terra is really waking up. They want to see if they still control the situation, she added. The Council had condemned Terra days ago. They had claimed the planet was dangerous, unstable, unworthy of being part of the Unity Circle. They said humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, too bold. And now they had come to observe what their decision had caused. The lights in the sky adjusted their formation, slowing as they approached the atmosphere. It didn't feel like an attack. Not yet, more like a test. "Do we do?" Lyra asked. "We stay calm," he said. "We observe. The same way they're observing us." He kept his voice steady, but inside He could feel pressure building. This moment would decide everything. If the Council saw Terra's machines awakening, they might send more ships. They might even try to take control of the planet. But Terra was not defenseless anymore. They watched the Council ships circle high above. Then something unexpected happened. The large command vessel in the valley turned its head slightly, as if it were alive, and looked up at the sky. The blue lines along its surface brightened. "It sees them," Lyra whispered. The tower's lights shifted in color. A deep tone vibrated through the ground. The underground generators pulsed. Everything that belonged to Terra seemed to focus on the incoming ships. The ship in the valley opened its chest plates. A core of light grew brighter and brighter. "Is it preparing a signal?" Lyra asked. "A warning?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe Terra is saying it's awake." The light shot upward, forming a beam that reached the clouds. It was not a weapon. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. Instead, it created a wide ring of light in the sky, like a message being written across the atmosphere. The Council ships paused. Their formation broke slightly. They looked uncertain. Lyra stared at the sky. They didn't expect Terra to communicate. He nodded slowly. They thought Terra was dead. "But Terra is talking," she said, "and the whole galaxy can hear." Far away on another ridge, Keel sprinted toward them, waving his arms to get their attention. He was out of breath when he reached them, but his excitement made his words rush out. "You both need to see this," he said. "More hangars are opening. Not just in this valley. Everywhere. North, south, west. The old network is waking all at once." "How many ships?" Lyra asked. "Dozens," Keel said. "Maybe hundreds. And they all seem to be linked." He exchanged a glance with Lyra. They both felt the same realization settle like a heavy truth. Was not waking a fleet. Terra was waking a civilization. The ground rumbled again as another hangar door opened. A row of ships rose slowly into view, each one unique in shape and design. Some were sleek. Some were massive. Some carried arm-like structures. Some had wings that folded out like ancient birds. Even the air felt thicker now, filled with energy from systems that had been silent for centuries. Machines moved like they remembered every order they had ever received. Lights flickered like old eyes blinking awake after a long darkness. He stepped back, unable to hold in his reaction. This is beyond anything the Council knows. "And they're seeing all of it," Lyra said, glancing at the sky. The Council fleet remained silent, watching, waiting. Terra's ships did not rise into attack formation. They did not threaten. Instead, they positioned themselves in careful lines, almost ceremonial, like they were welcoming someone, or warning someone, or reminding the stars who Terra once was. Then something even more unexpected happened. A soft voice came from the device Lyra held. It wasn't human. It wasn't machine-like either. It felt balanced, calm, old, and wise. "Guardians of Terra," the voice said, "you stand upon the awakening." Lyra's hand trembled. "It's speaking to us." The voice continued. "The stars turn their eyes to this world once more. And so Terra rises to meet their gaze." He swallowed hard. "Are you the system intelligence?" "I am the memory of Terra," the voice replied. "I am the keeper of what was lost." Lyra stepped forward. "Why now? Why wake everything now?" "Because you returned," the voice said. "Because the Council has forgotten respect. Because Terra will no longer remain silent." He felt chills run down his spine as the meaning settled in. Terra wasn't just awakening because of old programming. Terra was awakening because the galaxy had judged it unfairly. The voice spoke again. "Prepare yourselves. Part of the journey ends here, but a greater part begins." The valley grew brighter as more ships powered up. The sky glowed faint blue where the signal ring remained. The Council ships hovered cautiously. Everything was ready. Everything was. Awake. Everything was watching, and the next decision would decide the fate of humans, Terra, and the entire Council. The day felt heavier than the others. From the moment the sun rose, there was a strange calm spread across the plains of Terra. Not a single bird moved. Not a single leaf rustled. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something important to happen. Even the awakened machines seemed quieter, standing tall and still like ancient guardians watching the horizon. He walked across the ridge with slow steps, taking in the scene spread before him. Hundreds of Terra's ships were no longer hidden underground. They stood in plain sight, glowing softly, ready for whatever came next. The light running along their sides looked like slow waves, steady and controlled. They didn't look aggressive. They didn't look frightened. They simply looked awake. He had seen many things in his life. He had seen storms that shook the mountains. He had seen cities crumble to dust during conflicts. He had seen people lose hope, but he had never seen a moment where a planet and entire world seemed to rise and face the galaxy with such quiet strength. Lyra joined him after a few moments. Her hair was tied back roughly, as if she had rushed to reach him. Her eyes were fixed on the sky. The Council ships were still there, moving slowly in a large circle, trying to understand what they were witnessing. They haven't sent anyone down yet, she said softly. They're scared, he replied, and they should be. But he didn't say this with pride. He said it with truth. The Council had judged Terra without understanding it. They thought it was weak. They thought it was empty. They thought humans were nothing more than troublemakers who didn't deserve respect. Now they were seeing how wrong they had been. Deep vibration moved through the ground. Not violent, just steady, like a drumbeat. The light around the largest command vessel brightened, and the voice of Terra returned, flowing through the air with calm power. Guardians, the voice said, the Council watches with doubt, but you must not fear. Terra rises to speak its truth. Lyra held her device tighter. Does Terra want us to communicate with them? It is not about wanting, the voice answered. It is about what must be done. Keel reached them moments later. He looked tired but alert, carrying a small transmitter. The Council just sent a message, he said. They want to talk. They want to assess the situation. He gave a faint, humorless laugh at the use. Last words. They all knew what that meant. The Council did not like surprises. They especially did not like surprises from planets they had condemned. What did the message say exactly? Lyra asked. They said they require a peaceful meeting, Keel replied, but they didn't sound confident. More like they're trying not to show how confused they are. He nodded slowly. We'll meet them, but we won't go alone. Terra's command vessel shifted slightly, as if it understood his decision. The ground hummed. The ship opened a small gate on its side. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. You will not stand empty-handed. The voice of Terra said, the galaxy must see the truth. The three of them exchanged looks. This was bigger than all of them. Bigger than this valley. Bigger than everything the Council thought it controlled. Keel climbed into the carrier ship that Terra had opened. Lyra followed. He took a deep breath and entered last. The moment he stepped inside, soft blue lights followed their path, guiding them gently. The air felt warm and safe, like the ship itself welcomed them. There were no sharp surfaces, no dangerous edges. Everything inside the vessel looked crafted to comfort, not intimidate. It was proof that Terra's ancient people were not just advanced, they were wise. The ship lifted off the ground slowly, without a single shake. Through the side windows, He watched the valley drift away. The towers, the hangars, the thousands of awakened machines, all of them seemed to bow slightly as the ship rose higher and higher. "They're showing the Council who we are," Lyra whispered. "No," he corrected gently. "Terra is showing the Council who it is." When they reached the upper atmosphere, the Council ships adjusted their formation again. Some moved backward. Some drifted sideways. They looked unsure about the small Terra vessel heading toward them. A Council transport ship extended a docking bridge, signaling them to approach. The lights on its surface flickered nervously, like the ship itself wasn't sure what was going to happen. "We go together," he said. They crossed the bridge and entered the Council ship. Inside, everything looked strict, clean, cold. Not warm like Terra's vessel, not inviting, just structured. The Council always worked like that. A tall official stepped forward, wearing silver bands on his sleeves. His face stayed completely stiff, but his voice betrayed a hint of worry. "We welcome you," the official said, "and we request an explanation for the activation of these machines." "We don't control Terra's awakening," he replied calmly. "Terra is doing this on its own." Lyra added, "You condemned the planet without understanding it. Now Terra is responding." The official narrowed his eyes. "Responding? Are you implying the planet is alive? That these machines operate without human command?" Keel stepped closer. "We don't need to imply anything. You saw it yourselves." The official looked uncomfortable. His hands twitched. His eyes moved around, avoiding their faces. It was clear he didn't know how to handle the situation. Another council member spoke from behind the group. "Your planet is unstable. Your people are unpredictable. Terra's awakening to be a threat to the stability of the galaxy." He shook his head. "Terra is not a threat. Silence is a threat. Ignorance is a threat. Disrespect is a threat. Terra is showing strength, not aggression." The council chamber went silent. Then the voice of Terra itself flowed through their devices, surprising everyone, including the council. "Council of the Stars," the voice said, "you condemned. Terra based on fear, not truth." Every official froze. Their expressions turned pale. Some looked like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. The voice continued. "Terra was silent because you never asked to listen. Terra slept because the galaxy forgot its purpose. But the return of humans has brought balance." "What? Are you?" One of the officials whispered. "A construct? A weapon?" "I am memory," Terra's voice replied. "I am the echo of a civilization that chose peace over domination. I am the guardian of those who live upon me." He stepped forward. "We didn't come here to fight. Terra didn't rise to harm anyone. But we will not allow the planet or its people to be insulted or dismissed anymore." Lyra added, "If you want peace, we want peace. If you want cooperation, we want cooperation. But if you try to control Terra," her voice tightened, "you will fail." Keel finished the thought. "Because Terra is awake now." The council members looked at each other nervously. One of them finally spoke. "What do you want from us?" The voice of Terra answered before any human could speak. "Respect, truth, and understanding." The official swallowed. And if we offer that, then Terra will stand with the galaxy," the voice said, "not against it." Silence settled again. This time it felt lighter. Like a heavy weight had lifted from the ship. Slowly, the official nodded. "And perhaps we were wrong." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't complete acceptance. But it was a beginning. He let out a small breath of relief. Lyra's shoulders relaxed. Keel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the tension leave him. The ship returned them to Terra as the sun dipped toward the horizon. As they descended, the valley lights grew brighter, welcoming them back. The ancient machines hummed softly. almost like they were greeting their own people. When they stepped out onto the ridge again, the world felt different, lighter, safer. Not because danger was gone, but because truth had finally been spoken. Terra had awakened. A council had listened, and humans once small, once ignored, now stood at the center of something bigger than anyone had ever imagined. As the wind moved across the valley, he looked at Lyra and Keel. "This is not the end," he said quietly. "No," Lyra agreed. "This is the beginning." They stood together as the last sunlight touched the awakened fleet. The sky was calm, the plains were peaceful, and Terra ancient, wise, powerful Terra was no longer silent. It had spoken, and the whole galaxy had heard.